Caleb Turner didn't have to look up. The moment he heard that faint electric hum, somewhere between a hornet's buzz and the whine of a distant air conditioner, he knew exactly what it was. A drone. Not just any drone. The expensive kind. Quiet, stable, designed for surveillance. And judging by the growing intensity of the sound, it was descending. Fast. He stepped out onto his back deck, spatula still in hand, and scanned the sky. Sure enough, a sleek black quadcopter hovered just 20 feet above his backyard, its gimbal-mounted camera panning slowly. It wasn't recording the grill, or the lawn furniture, or even him. It was focused on his daughter. Zoe, 15, sat curled up on the patio swing, earbuds in, lost in her book, completely unaware that a flying camera was practically breathing down her neck. Caleb's jaw tensed. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a curious kid flying a toy. This was targeted. Precise. And as the drone drifted lower, almost kissing the fence line, he felt something shift inside him. Something he'd worked hard to leave behind. He waved at the drone. No reaction. He shouted. Nothing. The drone jerked slightly, as if irritated, then turned and zipped away, smoothly, deliberately back toward the beige two-story colonial at the top of the cul-de-sac. Karen's house. Of course. Every neighborhood has a Karen. This one just happened to be an ex-cybersecurity analyst who now ran the HOA like a personal dictatorship. She wasn't just obsessed with rules, she weaponized them. Lawn an inch too high? Citation. Porch flag the wrong color? Warning. More than 4 cars in the driveway? Emergency violation notice. And now she had taken to the skies. Caleb stormed across the street and rang her doorbell. Karen Mallory opened the door with a smug smile, holding a wine glass large enough to bathe a small dog in. Her hair didn't move in the breeze. Neither did her expression. Something I can help you with, she asked. I think your drone just flew over my backyard. I know, she said, not even pretending to be surprised. Just a quick flyover. Neighborhood safety check. Someone's been leaving trash bins out a bit too long. It's a sanitation concern. Caleb's brow furrowed. The drone was hovering outside my daughter's window. Karen shrugged. If you've got nothing to hide, you shouldn't mind being seen. And then she closed the door. He walked back slowly, blood boiling. Zoe was inside now, clearly rattled. It was watching me this morning too, she said quietly. I didn't say anything because I thought maybe it was a toy. But it was just staring. Rachel, his wife, didn't need to say anything. Her eyes said it all. That night, Caleb sat in the garage, staring at a long-forgotten black case tucked behind a row of holiday decorations. He hadn't touched it in years. Not since the day he left his last defense contractor gig and promised himself a quiet life. He opened it. Inside, directional jammers, signal sniffers, field calibrators. The tools of a ghost. Caleb Turner had spent 6 years building counter-surveillance systems for classified projects. He had trained algorithms to confuse enemy drones, built emitters to reroute signal paths, and, on more than one occasion, silently dropped hostile UVs from the sky mid-mission. That life was supposed to be behind him. But apparently, HOA politics had other plans. By Monday morning, the citation started. Improper grill cover, non-regulation material. Visible garden tools, code violation. Unauthorized wind chime, yes, really. And always, the sound, the faint buzz of the drone overhead, dipping lower, hovering longer, watching like a sentry. It wasn't about neighborhood rules anymore. It was about control, about dominance. And Karen was escalating. She had begun installing new motion-activated cameras on her porch. Rumor had it she'd filed paperwork with the HOA board to propose aerial surveillance clauses for neighborhood safety. Caleb even spotted a contractor van outside her house one afternoon, marked with a logo he recognized from his past, a signal amplification firm. She wasn't just flying drones. She was building a network. But what Karen didn't know, what no one on that street knew, was that the quiet man in house number 14 had once designed digital weapons for people who didn't exist on paper. And he was done being watched. The drone would be back. And this time, it wasn't getting away. The buzzing became a part of life. Every morning at 9:03 a.m., like clockwork, the drone launched from Karen Mallory's second-story window. Caleb knew the time because he started logging it. He logged everything now. Flight altitude, trajectory, signal strength, camera angle. At first it seemed random, just loops around the cul-de-sac, lazy figure eights over rooftops. But over the next few days, a pattern emerged. Certain homes got more attention. Certain angles were repeated. His house? Always a double pass. It was clear, Karen wasn't monitoring the neighborhood. She was monitoring them. He'd spent 2 nights running signal analysis from the garage, drinking black coffee, and watching the telemetry like a storm tracker. He even tested her drone's altitude using an old visual rangefinder. 35 feet, well below FAA guidelines for hobby drones. Technically legal in their state, but legally gray was still morally wrong. And what she was doing? It wasn't about safety. It was obsession. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was Tuesday afternoon, and Caleb was cleaning the gutters when a small voice called up from below. "Hey, Mr. Turner?" It was Leo, the 10-year-old boy from next door. Usually energetic and chatty, today he stood in his yard with his hoodie pulled tight and his eyes darting nervously overhead. "What's up, bud?" Caleb asked, wiping his hands. Leo hesitated. "Do you know if that thing is going to fly today?" Caleb looked at him. "The drone." The boy nodded. "It keeps flying over my yard. I was riding my bike and it followed me. I thought it was cool at first, but now it's just creepy. I don't like going outside anymore." Caleb's chest tightened. This wasn't just about his family anymore. Karen's obsession was bleeding into the lives of kids, neighbors, people who didn't even know how to fight back. People like Leo. And if there's one thing Caleb hated more than surveillance, it was surveillance against those who couldn't defend themselves. That night, he pulled the old workbench into the middle of the garage and opened the toolkit. Operation Birdhouse was born. He started with a decoy, an oversized wooden birdhouse Rachel had bought years ago at a flea market. He hollowed out the base, added a miniature directional signal jammer, and rigged it to a trigger device embedded in a garden light switch. The device wouldn't break anything. Not yet. But it would cause Karen's drone to experience just enough interference to rattle her. Still legal, mind you. Still subtle. Just inconvenient. He mounted the birdhouse on the edge of the deck, a charming little robin perched on the entrance, staring blankly into the yard. Zoe didn't question it. Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Please tell me that's not what I think it is." Caleb smiled. "Think of it as pest control." The next morning, Caleb sat on the patio with a smoothie and his laptop. At precisely 9:03, the drone rose again, silent and ominous, its camera sweeping the neighborhood like a watchful eye. It hovered into range. Caleb flipped the switch. The drone stuttered, dipped 3 feet, spun awkwardly to the left, then righted itself like a drunk pilot regaining balance. It hovered for a moment, then zipped straight back to Karen's house. 5 minutes later, an email from the HOA pinged the inbox of every resident. Subject: Urgent, possible foreign interference detected. We believe someone may be attempting to sabotage neighborhood security systems. Remain vigilant. Report suspicious activity immediately. Caleb nearly spit out his drink. It was absurd, and exactly what he wanted. Paranoia. He needed Karen flustered, off balance. That's when people like her make mistakes. But what he didn't expect was how fast she would escalate. That afternoon, a white van parked in front of her house. 2 men got out, hauling equipment labeled Signal Boost Technologies. By sundown, Karen had mounted a 12-foot antenna on her garage roof and added 2 motion-sensitive infrared cameras to her front porch. She was building a surveillance fortress. "Jesus," Rachel muttered that night, watching from the kitchen window. "She's turning this place into a military outpost." Caleb showed her the frequency logs he'd captured. "And she still doesn't realize she's the one being studied now." Rachel leaned in, voice low. "Just be careful. She's crazy. And crazy gets dangerous when it feels cornered." She was right. The very next day, the drone came back. But this time, it wasn't alone. A tiny black speaker was strapped to the drone's undercarriage. As it hovered over Caleb's patio, it let out a distorted voice, grating, metallic, and unmistakably Karen's. "This is private property. Please comply with HOA regulations." Zoe ran out of the house, eyes wide. "Is it talking now? What the hell?" Caleb stood calmly beneath it, sipping his coffee. He didn't respond, didn't flinch, just stared up at the machine and smiled. Because now, it wasn't just a drone anymore. It was a target, and it was time to go hunting. The next 2 days were quiet. Too quiet. No emails. No citations. No emergency meetings about lawn flamingos or non-compliant porch swings. Caleb knew better than to mistake the silence for surrender. Karen wasn't backing down. She was recalibrating. And so was he. From the garage, Caleb ran loop tests on his jammer array. The birdhouse was just phase 1, a poke, as he liked to call it. What came next would be precision-guided disruption. Not just static, but redirection. Confusion. false GPS signals, tricks to make the drone think it was somewhere it wasn't. All legal, all invisible, and all devastating to a pilot who thought she had control. Using old software he'd once developed for aerial spoofing tests, Caleb programmed a small signal spoofer. The device could trick the drone's positioning system just enough to throw off its flight path. The idea wasn't to crash it, not yet, but to make it question its own coordinates, triggering the drone's fail-safe mode. Most commercial models had one. Emergency return to home, but with just the right commands. Home could be somewhere else. Somewhere wet. He had several targets in mind. Rachel's koi pond, the storm drain runoff at the end of the block, even the bird bath next door. But there was one location that stood out for its poetic potential. Karen's own pool. A massive concrete status symbol in her backyard, complete with LED lighting, a flamingo float, and a hideous custom sign that read, Mallory Estate Oasis. HOA founders welcome. The irony would be delicious. He mapped her drone's daily route again. 9:03 a.m. sharp. Then another pass at 3:30 p.m. before sunset. It always flew the same radius. Dipped lower near his property. Zigzagged over the Whitman's tulips. Did a strange wobble every time it passed over Brenda's hot tub, like it was getting confused by the steam. And of course, it did 2 full loops over Caleb's deck. He adjusted the spoofer's targeting parameters. A single line of code would now inject false GPS coordinates, just enough to nudge the drone in the wrong direction. Not a crash, but a malfunction. He even rehearsed the moment, walking the deck like a stage manager, aligning the transmitter's cone of influence. Rachel stepped out with coffee. Please tell me you're not playing real-life Missile Command again. He looked up, grinning. It's not war. It's neighborhood theater. She stared at him, amused and slightly concerned. You've definitely been smiling more since the drone started talking. Because now I know how it ends. Thursday, the day of the next HOA board meeting. Karen had called it herself, an emergency session to discuss community interference. And as fate would have it, it landed on the exact day she launched her most aggressive drone patrol yet. By 8:45 a.m., Caleb was in place. Laptop open. Birdhouse online. Spoofer calibrated. The sky was clear, the air still. Perfect flight conditions. 9:03. The drone launched. He could hear it before he saw it. Low, mechanical, confident. It crested over her roofline like a hunting hawk, camera tilting, speaker armed. Please comply with HOA regulations. Please comply. Karen's voice again, but this time slurred, slightly distorted. Caleb smirked. Clearly she had recorded it over wine again. The drone reached the deck. Caleb flipped the switch. At first, nothing happened. The drone hovered, camera twitching slightly. Then, it spun right, unexpectedly, dipped, hesitated, and instead of continuing its route, it started to veer left, toward Karen's property. Straight toward her backyard. Caleb nudged the spoofer one final time, injecting a false command. Return to home. GPS coordinates adjusted. The drone stuttered, tilted, and then committed, spiraling slowly downward like a drunken ballet dancer. In Karen's backyard, she lounged in her pool float, drink in hand, phone raised as if recording some glorious HOA announcement. Then the hum grew louder. She looked up. What the hell? No, 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 no. The drone, blinking red, dipped once, twice, then dropped straight into the deep end, splashing like a torpedo. Waves rippled. The speaker crackled. Karen screamed. She tried to stand on the float and immediately slipped into the shallow end, flailing in a soaked sundress, one wedge sandal flying into the bushes. Caleb closed the laptop and exhaled. It was done. The next morning, the silence returned, but this time, it was real. No buzzing. No violations. No Karen. But it wouldn't last. Not with someone like her. And as predicted, she came back not with control, but with rage. The email landed at 6:14 a.m. sharp. Emergency HOA meeting, 7 p.m. tonight. Subject: ongoing acts of digital sabotage and hostility toward community safety systems. Attendance strongly encouraged. Karen had pulled the emergency cord, and Caleb couldn't wait. All week, he had been gathering footage, not just from his own backyard, but from the neighbors. Short clips, time-stamped, GPS-tagged, unmistakable. The drone hovering over backyards, peering into second-floor windows, pausing above birthday parties, spooking dogs and recording through half-drawn curtains. One particularly disturbing video showed the drone loitering just feet away from a trampoline where two kids were playing. In another, the camera clearly zoomed in on Brenda while she soaked in her hot tub at night. Each clip was reviewed, edited, stitched into a presentation. And at the end, the final card, Karen Mallory herself, in her upstairs living room, remote in hand, eyes fixed on a monitor as the drone hovered outside Zoe's bedroom window. Caleb had confirmed it wasn't just visual, there was audio. Her voice, captured faintly from the drone's mic. "There you are, got you." He loaded the entire compilation onto a USB stick, labeled in Sharpie. Neighborhood reality. The rec center that evening buzzed like a courtroom before a scandal verdict. Chairs were filled, more than usual. Families, seniors, teens still in soccer jerseys. Even Mr. Harris, who hadn't attended a meeting since 2014, was there with a bag of kettle corn. Karen arrived late, which was unlike her. But she entered with flair, blazer stiff, jaw tight, tablet in hand like she was about to launch a product for Apple. She barely looked at anyone as she marched to the head of the table, flanked by laminated flyers and a giant foam board titled "Community Under Attack, an HOA President's Plea for Order." Caleb sat in the second row, USB stick in pocket. Rachel beside him. Zoe 2 chairs over, arms folded tight. Karen cleared her throat like she was hosting a TED Talk. "Before we begin tonight's agenda," she announced, "we must address the escalating interference with our neighborhood's aerial safety device." Caleb raised his hand. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Turner, this isn't a Q&A. "I'm not asking a question," Caleb said, standing calmly. "I have something I think everyone should see. Something that speaks to community safety." Without waiting, he walked to the projector setup and inserted the USB. The room dimmed. The first video played. A wide shot of the drone hovering over Caleb's backyard. Then Zoe's face came into view. Then more clips, Leo, riding his bike, nervously looking over his shoulder. Brenda's hot tub footage. The trampoline. The drone pausing outside second-story windows at twilight. The room fell silent. Even Karen's usual allies looked uncomfortable. Then came the final clip. Karen, remote in hand, staring at the feed as the drone locked onto Zoe's window. Her voice, "There you are." Silence. Then whispers. Board member Marcy leaned forward. "Karen, is that your living room?" Karen stood abruptly. "This is out of context. This is character assassination. I was monitoring for potential trespassing and liability exposure." Brenda spoke up from the back. "Were you monitoring my hot tub at 10 p.m.? Because I'm pretty sure that's not liability exposure. That's voyeurism." Someone near the door laughed. A few others followed. Karen's voice sharpened. "You're all being manipulated by a rogue technician with a vendetta." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Funny. I thought you said if we had nothing to hide, we shouldn't mind being watched." Gasps. A few claps. Karen turned red. "This is a setup. That footage is illegal." Board President Howard, usually spineless, spoke up. "Actually, Karen, several of these clips came from residents. Their homes, their yards, their security systems, all fully within their rights." Karen looked around, realizing the tides had turned. No more nods. No backup. Just glares. Howard continued, voice steady. "You've crossed the line. No HOA regulation permits aerial surveillance. And frankly, this borders on criminal invasion of privacy." Marcy added, "We'll be reviewing your position immediately." Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She stood there, shaking, then gathered her things and stormed out, knocking over her own foam board on the way. The door slammed behind her. And just like that, the queen of control was dethroned. The next morning, the HOA email came from Howard's account, not Karen's. Notice of board action. Effective immediately, HOA member Karen Mallory has been suspended from all enforcement duties pending formal review. A new policy has been added to the bylaws. No aerial surveillance devices may be used over private property without consent, commonly referred to as the Karen clause. The neighborhood rejoiced. Someone left a toy drone in the community garden with a cardboard sign. "Here lies Karen's Eye in the Sky, 2023 to 2025. Tom changed his Wi-Fi name to Enemy Frequency." Brenda printed a T-shirt that read, "Still waiting on my hot tub apology." As for Caleb, he finally spent the morning on his deck, coffee in hand, without glancing up once. Karen disappeared. Not physically, her beige colonial still stood, shutters perfectly aligned, lawn eerily pristine. But she was gone in every other sense. The queen of citations, the HOA's all-seeing eye, the woman who once patrolled with a clipboard and a glare now became a silent shadow behind drawn curtains. Her porch light never came on. The mailbox overflowed. Neighbors whispered when walking past, glancing toward the dark windows like it might blink back. Some said she was regrouping. Others thought her husband, Greg, had finally convinced her to let go. Either way, the buzzing stopped. And in its absence, something unexpected happened. Life came back. The hum of laughter returned to driveways. Basketballs bounced. Sprinklers sprayed. Barbecues lit up like little pockets of joy. No more citations for plastic flamingos or gnomes. No more hushed conversations. No more fear that stepping out to grab the mail would land you in the next HOA bulletin. Even Zoe, who had spent weeks keeping her curtains closed, began reading on the patio swing again. Sometimes she looked up, reflexively, only to smile when there was nothing there. One evening, about 2 weeks after the meeting, Caleb rolled open the garage door and pulled out a dusty plastic box labeled Project Sky Basket. Inside were drone parts. Not Karen's kind, no cameras, no GPS overlays. This was a kit he and Zoe had started months ago but shelved when things got tense. It was her idea. A drone that delivers snacks. Simple. Wholesome. Not for spying, but for serving. Father and daughter spent the next few afternoons soldering, programming, assembling. They added a little hook beneath the frame to carry a basket, just enough for a water bottle or a bag of cookies. The final test run happened on a crisp Saturday morning. Caleb launched the drone from the back deck. It hovered. It spun once, then glided gently toward Zoe, who squealed as it dropped a granola bar at her feet. Mission success. She grinned. Bet Karen never thought this is what drones could be for. Caleb smiled. Nope. She only knew how to watch people, never how to help them. The following weekend, the HOA board, now under new, calmer leadership, organized something they hadn't done in years, a community cookout. Officially, it was called Neighborhood Unity Day, but everyone knew what it really was, a celebration of freedom. Every household showed up. Lawn chairs dotted the field near the clubhouse. Kids ran wild with water balloons. The air smelled like charcoal and grilled pineapple. Someone brought a cake shaped like a drone, complete with candy propellers. At sunset, Howard, the once meek board president, stood on a small stage with a mic in hand. He cleared his throat. Before we wrap up tonight, there's one more bit of business. We'd like to recognize someone who reminded us what privacy means. And more importantly, what community should feel like. He lifted a small golden trophy shaped like a cartoon drone with bent propellers and googly eyes. For outstanding service in aerial pest control, Caleb Turner. The crowd roared. Caleb laughed, stunned, as Rachel pushed him forward. He walked to the stage and accepted the award with a mock salute. Careful, someone shouted. He might reprogram your sprinklers next. Tom, ever the jokester, showed up wearing a badge made from cardboard and a printed image of the birdhouse jammer. Across the front, Deputy of Domestic Drone Defense. Even Greg, Karen's husband, was there. He didn't speak, just gave Caleb a nod. It was an apology, but it was acknowledgement. And sometimes that was enough. That night, Caleb sat on the porch with Rachel. Zoe was inside, video calling her friends, probably sharing the trophy reveal. Rachel leaned back. Crazy, huh? All of this, because you were flipping burgers. He chuckled. And a very nosy drone. She looked at him. Do you regret it? He thought for a long moment. No. I think some people need to be reminded that control has limits, and privacy still matters. Besides, it was worth it just to see that thing belly flop into her pool. Rachel laughed so hard she nearly spilled her lemonade. You definitely timed that. Every inch of it. A few weeks later, Caleb was walking to the mailbox when he saw Karen for the first time since the meeting. She stood alone at the edge of her driveway, staring silently up at the sky. No drone. No clipboard. Just her and the stars. She looked older. Tired. He almost waved. Almost. But before he could, she turned and went back inside, her front door clicking shut like punctuation on a forgotten sentence. Caleb stood there a while longer, taking in the stillness. Above him, the sky was finally quiet, and it felt like peace. 1 year later, the neighborhood was thriving. Lawns were a little messy, but the people were happier. HOA meetings were shorter. Rules were lighter. No one feared getting fined over a mismatched planter or wind chimes shaped like flamingos. Brenda's hot tub was fully visible now, and she didn't care who knew. It was a calm Saturday afternoon when a young couple, freshly moved into house number 27, showed up at the clubhouse barbecue. Their names were Brian and Ava, and they were still learning how the neighborhood worked. As they mingled, Brian spotted a laminated sign on the clubhouse bulletin board. Bylaw 42. No aerial surveillance over private property, the Karen clause. He turned to Tom, who now wore his birdhouse badge unironically on weekends, and asked, "Hey, what's the Karen clause?" Tom looked like a kid who'd been asked to tell a ghost story at a campfire. "Oh," he said with a grin, "you're in for a treat." Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered, mostly new residents, curious and wide-eyed. Tom took a bite of his burger, wiped his hands, and began. Once upon a time, there was a drone. Not just any drone. This one talked. It hovered. It stared. It even zoomed in on Brenda's bath bombs. Laughter rippled. He pointed at Caleb, who was sipping lemonade a few feet away. And that man over there? He didn't just stop it. He made it do a swan dive right into the pool of the person who flew it. Gasps. Her name was Karen, Tom whispered theatrically. And she ran the HOA. But she flew too close to the sun. Or in this case, too close to a guy who used to jam government-grade surveillance gear for a living. Caleb shook his head, amused. I didn't jam it. I redirected it. Tom winked. Potato, potato. Someone from the crowd added, didn't you win a drone-shaped trophy for it? Another voice. Wait, is that real? The Karen clause is actually named after a real Karen. Brenda chimed in. Oh, she was real, all right. And so was the pool splash. By then, even Howard, the board president, had wandered over. He simply smiled and said, best bylaw we ever passed. And just like that, the legend lived on. Some said Karen moved out. Others swore they saw her peeking behind the blinds every third Tuesday. But no one really knew. What they did know was this. In this neighborhood, your yard was yours. Your sky was yours. And the only drones allowed were the kind that delivered cookies to your daughter while she did her math homework. Everything else was a story for the next barbecue.